I'm Dr. Deborah Birx.
And I'm Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Not really. It's us, back with our third and final episode of 2020, A Year to Remember. Did I hear a sigh of relief?
If you haven't seen them, our first two episodes focus on the terrible toll that coronavirus has taken on the United States and Trump's refusal to take responsibility. There have been plenty of new developments on that score in the last 4 months. As of January 20th, 2021, when he left office, the number of cases in the United States had reached over 24 million, and more than 400,000 Americans had died. Could we ever have imagined that back in March of last year?
Controlling the virus was never President Trump's goal, and the results are devastating. The United States accounts for 1/4 of the cases in the world and nearly 1/5 of the death toll. New daily cases peaked at over 300,000 one day in January. And right now we have over 500,000 fatalities, with only Brazil a distant second.
Also, researchers have discovered new, more contagious strains have been circulating in the country. The one bright spot in all of this was the rollout of 2 vaccines that target the coronavirus. But unfortunately, the Trump administration, as usual, had a very poor rollout of the vaccines and refused to share necessary information with Biden's incoming health team.
One reason for the abysmal coronavirus statistics in the United States is Trump's choice of an advisor to take the place of the well-respected Dr. Anthony Fauci. The president instead embraced Dr. Scott Atlas, who is not an infectious disease expert. His appeal came from the fact that he was saying what Trump wanted to hear. He questioned mask wearing and promoted herd immunity as the goal of U.S. policy, with no regard for the human toll that would take.
With that in mind, it's no surprise that Trump held rallies all across the country where people wore no masks and practiced no social distancing. Even at the White House, that was the norm, so that super spreader events led to infections of staff and family alike. At least 40 people in Trump's inner circle contracted the virus, including the president, Melania, and their son Barron.
But enough about coronavirus. Aren't we all sick of it?
Mm-hmm. So this episode is not about how President Trump let us down when the coronavirus took over every aspect of our lives. It's actually about his 4-year assault on democracy. It's hard to imagine there will be anything more alarming than the events of the last few weeks. But it has been the steady erosion of American democracy over time that has brought us to this chaotic moment. Let's start with that Russia hoax. Just like coronavirus, Russian collusion has generated an overwhelming amount of press. We all know one famous instance of collusion because we heard Trump say on national TV, "Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing." Trump claimed that was just a joke, but people who know him best say he never jokes. And Russia tried to hack Hillary Clinton's office just 5 hours after his request. Why would Russia be so obliging then and so helpful with disinformation throughout the campaign? Because Putin hated Hillary Clinton and no doubt saw that Trump could be easily manipulated. Meanwhile, Trump dreamed of a branded skyscraper in downtown Moscow, guaranteeing him millions of dollars in revenue. Again, for him, it's all about the money. Those 2 goals laid the groundwork for all that followed. No backroom talks or secret meetings were even needed between Trump and Putin. They were on the same page. Once the unimaginable happened and Trump actually won the presidency, how did their relationship evolve? We still don't know what happened in the 5 secret meetings between Trump and Putin in 2017 and 2018. But Russia has to love where Trump has brought us. Our relationship with NATO is frayed. We no longer have a presence in Syria. The Open Skies Treaty has been abandoned. We're worst in the world for coronavirus deaths, and democracy is teetering on the brink. Putin couldn't have planned a better end to this presidency, or maybe this was his plan. During the campaign, Trump promised to choose only the best and most serious people for his administration. His goal supposedly was to drain the swamp. He eventually picked the best people to make government not work. He chose administrators who weren't qualified for their roles and people who didn't even believe in their agency's missions. Many were more interested in the perks of their positions than any hope for a better America. Here are just a few of the ways Trump's cabinet abused their positions in the early years of the administration. Scott Pruitt, Environmental Protection Agency, started flying first class after encountering hostility from other passengers. Ben Carson, Housing and Urban Development, ordered custom-made chairs, dining table, and hutch for his office at $31,000, taxpayers' expense. Steve Mnuchin, Treasury, requested a military plane for his European honeymoon. Ryan Zinke, Interior, used helicopters to avoid Washington traffic. Tom Price, Health and Human Services, took charter flights costing nearly $500,000. David Shulkin, Veterans Affairs, piggybacked a mini vacation on taxpayer-paid travel to conferences in Europe. In less than 2 years, 4 members of Trump's cabinet resigned under an ethics cloud: Price, Shulkin, Pruitt, and Zinke. But even more disturbing than their greed is the evident corruption of various cabinet members. Rick Perry, the Secretary of Energy, had said before his nomination that the department should not exist. And during one presidential debate, he was unable to remember the name of the department he wanted abolished. He flew under the radar for much of his tenure at the Energy Department until he became totally embroiled in the Ukraine scandal. He was actually the one who recommended Trump call President Zelensky. Wilbur Ross, the Secretary of Commerce, had a private equity firm that paid a $2.3 million fine in 2016 over undisclosed fees charged to investment partners. He was described by Forbes magazine as among the biggest grifters in American history. And for nearly a year after taking the job at Commerce, Ross retained ownership in a shipping company tied to Russian oligarchs and members of Putin's family. Strangely enough, President Trump ended up firing many of his best people. Think Chris Krebs, Mark Esper, Brad Parscale, Mick Mulvaney, John Bolton, Dan Coates, John Kelly, Jim Mattis, Jeff Sessions, H.R. McMaster, Rex Tillerson, Andrew McCabe, Steve Bannon, James Comey, and Michael Flynn, to name a few.
Many of those fired were replaced by acting appointees. As Trump stated, "I like acting because it can move so quickly. It gives me more flexibility." And of course, it gave him more power over those who served him since they hadn't been through the Senate confirmation process. They were more willing to back the president on controversial issues, and he could quickly dispose of someone he grew irritated with or tired of. By September of 2020, at least 17 officials in 12 different departments were serving in their positions illegally because their acting status exceeded the mandated 210-day limit from the time when the vacancy had first occurred. That included acting Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf, and acting Deputy Secretary of the Department, Ken Cuccinelli. Chad Wolf resigned 5 days after the January 6th attack on the Capitol, thereby resolving his illegal status. Trump's mini-firings included several of the federal government's internal watchdogs. Inspectors general are the top officials in the divisions that conduct oversight on an agency to ensure legal and financial accountability. Early in 2020, Trump fired Michael Atkinson, Intelligence Community. His handling of the Ukraine whistleblower complaint angered Trump. Glenn Fine from Defense and Mitch Boehm from Transportation. They were both on the Pandemic Response Accountability Committee, overseeing the spending of trillions of dollars in the coronavirus relief packages. Christy Grimm, Health and Human Services. She released a report detailing testing and supply shortages in hospitals responding to the pandemic. And Steve Linick, State Department. His office was investigating Secretary of State Mike Pompeo when he was fired.
And when it comes to choosing people with no expertise in their fields, the classic example is Senior Advisor to the President, Jared Kushner. He was initially tasked with Middle East peace, government reform, opioid crisis management, and criminal justice reform, plus he was a liaison to Mexico, China, and the Muslim community. His policy portfolio only expanded over the years to include Lebanon, border infrastructure, Central American economy issues, and the Department of Justice. Then in 2020, Jared was put in charge of an under-the-radar coronavirus task force that was supposed to find supplies of PPE. Staffed by young volunteers with no supply chain experience, the task force floundered, and the coronavirus response failed us again. Jared's added responsibility at the same time was running Donald Trump's re-election campaign from the White House. Clearly, neither of those tasks went very well. Besides Trump's son-in-law, one of the few people who survived the rocky last 4 years was Stephen Miller. His racist agenda and anti-immigration obsession became a driving force in the Trump administration. As a speechwriter, he was able to define Trump's immigration policies and set in motion all of the anti-immigrant actions to follow. He and Steve Bannon are credited with writing Donald Trump's inaugural address in 2017, famous for its bleak tone and reference to American carnage, in stark contrast to Biden's optimistic inaugural address of 2021.
Second only to Donald Trump when it came to undermining democracy was Attorney General Bill Barr. With his pompous pronouncements and insidious commentary, he enabled Trump's worst instincts. He first auditioned for the job in June of 2018, presenting unsolicited his radical view of presidential power in response to the Mueller investigation. To paraphrase, the president alone is the executive branch, possessing literally all federal law enforcement power and hence prosecutorial discretion. That includes supervisory authority over all cases, apparently even those that involve himself, his friends, or his enemies.
It was Bill Barr, of course, who told us in March 2019 what Robert Mueller had supposedly concluded after his lengthy investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 campaign. The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. And Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and I have concluded that the evidence developed during the special counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense. Shortly after, Mueller responded that Barr's summary did not fully capture the context, nature, and substance of the findings.
But we all know what Donald Trump heard, because the very day after Mueller testified before Congress in July, Trump got on the phone with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and pressured him to get dirt on his rival, Joe Biden. Even though Barr refused later in the fall to hold a press conference to exonerate Trump from any wrongdoing during the phone call, he did issue a statement saying, "The department's criminal division reviewed the official record of the call and determined, based on the facts and applicable law, that there was no campaign finance violation and that no further action was warranted."
Barr also, during his tenure, encouraged Rudy Giuliani's investigation into Hunter Biden in the Ukraine, appointed his own investigator to look into the origins of the FBI's Russia investigation, interfered in the sentencing of Michael Flynn and Roger Stone, asked Congress for dramatic new powers during emergencies, called the Russia investigation an effort to sabotage the presidency, and claimed it was one of the greatest tragedies of American history, tried to block Congress from seeing the secret grand jury material collected during the Mueller investigation, organized the forceful clearing of peaceful protesters from Lafayette Park for a presidential photo op, deployed federal forces to Portland, Oregon, despite strong opposition from the governor, agreed with Trump's claim that mail-in ballots create massive fraud, filed a brief along asking the Supreme Court to invalidate the Affordable Care Act, admitted he falsely claimed hostile foreign powers could send thousands of mail-in ballots to this year's election, insisted that as Attorney General he had all prosecutorial power and could interfere in cases at will, since prosecutors are like preschoolers, announced new rules permitting arrests or raids before an election, even if that might change the outcome.
And then, late in 2020, Bill Barr refused to appoint special counsel to take over the investigation of Hunter Biden, revealed there was no evidence of widespread voter fraud during the November election, and agreed that the recent cyber attack on the federal government was probably from Russia, even though Trump denied it. Wait, what? Oh, yeah. And Bill Barr resigned as Attorney General on December 23rd, just 2 weeks before the attack on the Capitol. Pretty convenient. And now, the book report. In our last episode, I recommended you read Mary Trump's book, Too Much and Never Enough. Her insights into the family dynamics during her uncle's early years are a frightening window into why the 45th president is who he is. For another scary account from someone in Donald Trump's inner circle, check out this book, Disloyal by Michael Cohen. This is the story of Trump, the man behind the myth, and it's told by his personal lawyer and fixer from the years before he was president. Why read a tell-all by this crook when there are at least 1,200 other books out there? Well, mainly because in Cohen's own words, I know where the skeletons are buried because I buried them. Really, it's all in here. How Trump actually made his famous deals, why he hated Obama so much, why he needed to become president in 2016, what was really going on with Russia, and on page 177, the story behind his wacky hairstyle. And for an added bonus, the infamous Steele dossier is in the appendix. This could be a fun read if things hadn't turned out so badly at the end of this presidency. Michael Cohen, because he knew Trump so well, also knew what to expect. Given my experience working for Mr. Trump, I fear that if he loses the election in 2020, that there will never be a peaceful transition of power. Read this book, if only because Cohen states emphatically, I can say with great confidence as you turn the page and meet the real Donald Trump for the first time, this is a book the President of the United States does not want you to read. If only more people had read it before the November election, Biden's 7 million vote win could have been much bigger. How many times in the last 4 years have we heard the word unprecedented used in reference to some new Trump initiative? I would say way too many times, especially when anti-democratic or aberrant might better describe the actions taken. Trump became famous for ignoring norms that we all assumed were laws. In November of 2020, the Washington Post magazine published an article titled The Abnormal Presidency by David Montgomery. It's about all the norms we thought were laws until they were ignored by Donald Trump. It's a long list, but it's worth pondering and maybe legislating.
Number 1, personally profiting from official business.
Number 2, not releasing tax returns.
Number 3, refusing oversight.
Number 4, interfering in Department of Justice investigations.
Number 5, abusing appointment power.
Number 6, insulting allies while cozying up to authoritarians.
Number 7, coarsening presidential discourse through Twitter and his rallies.
Number 8, politicizing the military.
Number 9, politicizing diplomacy and foreign policy.
Number 10, attacking judges.
Number 11, undermining intelligence agencies.
Number 12, publicizing lists of future Supreme Court picks.
Number 13, making far more false or misleading claims than any previous president, over 30,000 according to the Washington Post fact-checker database.
Number 14, abusing the pardon power.
Number 15, using government resources for partisan ends.
Number 16, making racialized appeals and attacks.
Number 17, dividing the nation in times of crisis.
Number 18, contradicting scientists, especially during COVID.
Number 19, derailing the tradition of presidential debates.
Number 20, undermining the faith in the 2020 election results.
And that's where his refusal to follow norms got him in trouble with laws.
In 2020, we all watched as he drove himself into a frenzy of fear that he would lose re-election. Instead of attacking the voting process, he should have been doing his job to fight the pandemic and show sympathy for the country. This is a year in quotes, with a bit of context in case you've forgotten. December 2019, actually the year before, but at that point impeachment was looming because of a July phone call to the Ukrainian president asking him to find dirt on Joe Biden.
In regard to the first impeachment vote, such atrocious lies by the radical left, do-nothing Democrats, this is an assault on America and an assault on the Republican Party.
January 2020, the impeachment trial begins. Trump is already in campaign mode.
Trump talking about the media. We drive them crazy. They say, he is not leaving, don't you? They say he is going to win and never going to leave. It's called Trump derangement syndrome. It really is. You know what they don't know is that if for any reason after 5 years we do leave, which we will, because I believe it's that stuff in that stuff, right? You know what will happen to the industry. They will all die and fold up, and it will be very boring out there, very boring. That's why I say at some point every single one of them will be endorsing Donald Trump.
February 2020, Trump is acquitted, but a new and deadly virus has just begun to spread in the United States.
Now the Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus, and this is their new hoax. We have 15 people in this massive country, and that's because of the fact that we won early. We won early. We could have had a lot more than that. So far, we have lost nobody to coronavirus in the U.S. You hear 35 and 40,000 people, and we've lost nobody. And you wonder, the press is in hysteria mode.
March 2020, ventilators, masks, testing have all become issues as people realize the seriousness of the pandemic. The first stimulus package is passed, and Trump and the governors are in conflict.
Talking about the CARES Act, stimulus and relief package, the things they had in there were crazy. They had levels of voting that if you ever agreed to it, you'd never have a Republican elected in this country again.
April 2020. The governors are pressed to reopen their states as Trump worries about what effect the falling economy might have on his re-election. The primaries reveal the problems the pandemic will cause for this election.
I think mail-in voting is horrible. It's corrupt. Sure, I can vote by mail because I'm allowed to. You get thousands and thousands of people sitting in someone's living room, signing ballots all over the place. No, I think mail-in voting is a terrible thing. Even the concept of early voting is not the greatest because a lot of things happen, but it's okay. There's a lot of dishonesty with mail-in voting. Republicans should fight very hard when it comes to statewide mail-in voting. Democrats are clamoring for it. Tremendous potential for voter fraud, and for whatever reason doesn't work out well for Republicans.
May 2020, the coronavirus numbers continue to increase, and so do Trump's attacks on voting.
Talking about the addition of a polling place in one of the most diverse sections of a California voting district, they're trying to steal another election. It's all rigged out there. These votes must not count. Scam in capital letters.
June 2020. Riots occur across the country after the killing of George Floyd. The virus numbers are still rising, and people worry about what summer will bring. Trump's poll numbers are looking bad.
We have to do this. We have to go to the polls on November 3rd, and the rest you know what to do. You know what to do. Got to keep the White House.
July 2020. Trump holds rallies all over the country while Biden stays at home and stays safe. The message from the White House becomes, "Open those schools." As the election heats up, so does the president's rhetoric.
With universal mail-in voting, not absentee voting, which is good, 2020 will be the most inaccurate and fraudulent election in history. It will be a great embarrassment to the USA. Delay the election until people can properly and safely vote. Amid Trump's attacks on the U.S. Postal Service, must know election results on the night of election, not days, months, or even years later. In an interview, Chris Wallace poses the question, "Are you a good loser?" Trump, "I'm not a good loser. I don't like to lose. I don't lose too often."
August 2020. The Democratic and Republican conventions are held. Trump insists they are doing a great job, but not getting credit for it.
As it became clear he might lose votes from his own supporters because of his attacks on absentee voting. Whether you call it vote by mail or absentee voting in Florida, the election system is safe and secure. Tried and true. Florida's voting system has been cleaned up. We defeated Democrats' attempts at change. So in Florida, I encourage all to request a ballot and vote by mail. But on another occasion, mail drop boxes are a voter security disaster that are not COVID sanitized.
September 2020. As numbers rise again, Trump's message is, "We're rounding the corner and the vaccine is coming."
As part of his rude and angry performance at the first presidential debate with Biden, Trump utters the famous command to the Proud Boys: stand back and stand by.
October 2020. Trump, as well as many in his White House, have COVID in October, but he quickly returns to campaigning. Giant, maskless rallies in swing states feature Air Force One as the backdrop. Coronavirus numbers continue to surge.
We have a level of support the likes of which nobody has, I don't think, ever seen before. You see how many crooked ballots are being found and turned back in and fraudulent? Just what I said. Then they'll say, he doesn't believe in freedom. I totally believe in freedom. What we're doing is freedom. At a rally in Michigan, you really drive them crazy if you say 12 more years. Then they say, he's a fascist, he's a fascist. The crowd then chanted, 12 more years, 12 more years.
November 2020, the election.
On election day, we are up big, but they are trying to steal the election. We will never let them do it. Votes cannot be cast after the polls are closed. The next day, day after election, this is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 in the morning and add them to the list. 2 days after the election, I'd like to provide the American people with an update on our efforts to protect the integrity of our very important 2020 election. If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. If you count the votes that came in late, we're looking at them very strongly, but a lot of votes came in late. 2 weeks later, he only won in the eyes of the fake news media. I concede nothing. We have a long way to go. This was a rigged election.
December 2020, the aftermath and the prelude.
I want to provide an update on our ongoing efforts to expose the tremendous voter fraud and irregularities which took place during this ridiculously long November 3rd elections. We used to have what was called Election Day. Now we have election days, weeks, and months. And lots of bad things happened during this ridiculous period of time. As president, I have no higher duty than to defend the laws and the Constitution of the United States. All I ask for is people with wisdom and courage, certain very important people. If they have wisdom and if they have courage, we're going to win this election in a landslide. It's going to be wild.
January, the insurrection at the Capitol.
During a conversation with the Georgia Secretary of State, January 3rd, there's no way I lost Georgia. There's no way. We won by hundreds of thousands of votes. So look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state. At a rally on the National Mall, January 6th, we will stop the steal. You don't give up when there's theft involved. Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. We're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them. And Mike Pence is going to have to come through for us. If he doesn't, that will be a sad day for our country because you're sworn to uphold our Constitution. 70 minutes in this vein, and then we all know what happened. A 4-year assault on democracy ended in violence and bloodshed. After weeks of tension and uncertainty, culminating in an attack on the Capitol by insurrectionists, Joe Biden is finally inaugurated as the 46th president on January 20th, 2021. As part of that ceremony, 22-year-old Amanda Gorman read her incredible poem, The Hill We Climb. Here is an excerpt from it. We will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the windswept northeast where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the northwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover and every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country, our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there's always light. If only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. Even in retrospect, this is all pretty depressing and sad. But look at it this way. Donald Trump lost by 7 million votes. Millions of people are getting vaccinated for the coronavirus. Joe Biden is president, and he actually cares about this country and its people. A new spring is coming. Stay safe, be well, hang in there.